Before we move on to the COVID panic that is getting stoked again in the media across the country, the latest numbers with that, and also some other battles in the culture war that continue to play out in boardrooms and on Zoom calls now, because that's where people are really doing a lot of their conversing about business and dealing with colleagues now. So, people forget the rules. The rules are, when you're talking about, say, diversity and inclusion, you better shut up if you're a white male, not allowed to ask any questions, share any thoughts, because you never know. You never know if your wokeness will be considered insufficient for your corporation. That's a lesson that a lot of people are learning. And it's not just white males, other people too. If your wokeness, the white males have the least amount of, in the woke world we live in, the least amount of ability to offend the new. This is political correctness again. We're just calling it something else. Woke is just a new term for PC, but PC has now overtaken all of corporate America, and it's sad to see it happen, but that's where we are. No one's allowed to have independent thoughts. No one's allowed to ask any real questions. Just nod your head. Yes, absolutely. Whatever we're told by the corporate consultants about white privilege, we must nod our heads. Okay, sure. We'll get into that. But I did want to say that the president, while he mentioned a number of African-American heroes from our past, and he went into greater detail about, because they're on the monument behind him, the individuals who are commemorated on Mount Rushmore. Frederick Douglass is someone who you would think, to anybody who knows American history, would be held up as a moral hero, a genius in his time, an incredibly talented writer. His rhetorical skills were profound, and he had a statue of Frederick Douglass in Rochester, New York, which was where the abolitionist newspaper, the North Star, was originally located. Later, it was Frederick Douglass's paper. A statue was toppled and damaged, and not entirely destroyed, and dragged into a ravine on the anniversary of one of what is Frederick Douglass's most well-known speeches. And so I just thought I would take a moment, given that his statue was desecrated, and we don't know who it is yet. We're not supposed to think that it's part of this iconoclasm spasm from Democrats, from self-righteous idiot Democrats all across the country. We're supposed to think, we may never know the people, the ideology behind the destroying of a statue when there are all these statues being destroyed across the country. Maybe it's a false flag operation. That's what I had some lib journos come at me with. And look, I mean, it's possible. It's possible that happened. I can't prove it, but I mean, really? That's what we're going to go with? Here's what everyone should know about Frederick Douglass. His story, I'm surprised, quite honestly, that it has not been made. Should be made into a major series on a channel. Frederick Douglass should be at the very top of the conversations about people to be honored, whether it's on our currency or new statues or new whatever, to honor the heroes of our past. Here's a man who thought, wrote, spoke, debated, who started out not just with difficult, with deeply oppressive origins, born to a slave mother in Maryland. His father was white. He never knew his father. His father was never a part of his life. And he was raised as a slave in Maryland, and was taught, after he would be assigned these different slave roles, and was taught to read against the law at the time by the wife of the slave owner that he was that he was engaged in labor for. And Frederick Douglass, escaped. He went to the North. He became a true firebrand of abolition. He traveled overseas, raised money, was part of one of the most important abolitionist newspapers founded in Rochester, New York. He raised money in Europe, came back. He had to evade slave hunters who were trying to find him up in, I believe it was Massachusetts at one point in his life. So he was under true duress, had to first escape, which is a terrifying ordeal, for which we know the consequences could be severe, escaped to the north, evaded slave hunters, became a voice of true power and change in the abolitionist movement, got together with other abolitionists in the north, founded a newspaper, bought his own freedom, was part of convincing Abraham Lincoln of the importance of making the Civil War a war to end slavery, continued to be a senior advisor to the United States government even after the Civil War and the Reconstruction era, held high posts in the federal government. I mean, the guy was incredible, and yet does not receive, quite honestly, from any part of American culture, does not receive his due. I know they made a Harriet Tubman movie recently. I've not yet seen it. I plan on watching it. And Harriet Tubman also has a very inspiring story. But, I mean, Frederick Douglass belongs in that same pantheon alongside the true brilliance of the founders and of Lincoln, and he is at that level in every sense. And I wanted to tell you some of his background, and this is just extemporaneously what I can draw upon for you during the show. But his statue was destroyed in Rochester. So we have to think, if a statue of Frederick Douglass, I know I saw the destruction by a bunch of idiots in Baltimore of a Christopher Columbus statue. Christopher Columbus was in the 15th century. I don't know what the left thinks, but you're not going to find a human being on planet Earth in the 15th century that is sufficiently woke. Not one. No one. There's no such thing. No one in the 15th century was where they would need to be on male-female equality, on equality of the races, on trans equality, nothing. In the 15th century, you're not going to get that from anybody. So I guess no 15th century figures allowed to have statues, right? I mean, it's just crazy. But this is also what $50,000 a year tuition from left-wing indoctrination factories that have sold people on the false promise that just take out all these loans or have your parents pay to have you go to one of these institutions that, are kind of middling, to be honest with you. They're kind of meh. There are really very few schools that have the kind of brand value that make the price tag worth it, even at the undergrad level. That's why more and more people should go to state school, in-state tuition, go to cheaper programs, get a better education, go do professional training, go do graduate work if you want, but get someone else to pay for it. There needs to be a whole rethink of that. But anyway, the little idiots running around in Baltimore destroying the statue of Columbus. They put a video up of it. So we know they've already been doing that. And they've already attacked statues of people who fought against the Confederacy. They've attacked abolitionist statues in D.C. They've attacked, in Minnesota, a statue of someone who fought for the North. I mean, it's just, there's no rhyme or reason to it, really, because they're just looking to destroy and to intimidate. But even for Democrats, I've got to say, the ones who remember a little bit of American history, destroying a statue of Frederick Douglass is, that's just too much. So this is why they're not saying, well, but what about this thing that he did? They're saying, oh, it must have been a false flag operation. Could be, but it's a little bit like saying, maybe this time, all reason and all evidence will point us in the wrong direction, because all reason and evidence this weekend, when there's statues being toppled by Democrat mobs everywhere, is that yet again, this was, and I'm sure you could find idiots on the left who would say that the elevation of Frederick Douglass is somehow used as a tool by the right or by conservatives, whatever, right? You'll find someone to say something really stupid about this. But to anybody who has a functioning brain still, if they'll destroy statues of Frederick Douglass, they will destroy statues of literally anyone. Think of anyone, that statue could be next. So we're working from home these days, but working from home is driving up one of the worst types of cyber crime out there, home title theft. You see, cyber criminals are targeting you while you're in your home. In fact, they're targeting your home itself. What they do is find your data online, figure out where they can find your home's legal title. Then they take out loans against your home, and you get stuck with the payments. Banks, insurance, and basic identity theft services don't protect you. Home Title Lock puts a virtual barrier around your home's title. This is the way to go. Protect your home now. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim. You can use code BUCK for 30 free days of protection to help you through this crisis. Again, go to HomeTitleLock.com and use code BUCK for 30 free days of protection right now. What do you do when the left freaks out at you? How do you handle the arguments that the liberals are using these days? I get this question all the time. And there's a part of me that would want to retreat into my high school Lincoln Douglas training and say, well, you need to, what is their premise and what is your premise? And you need to, go into the rebuttals. And oh, no. That's fine, but that's not really going to work these days. You need to understand that the left isn't making arguments. They are expressing emotions. And they also, therefore, view any pushback against them or any effort to give an opposing point of view as an assault on how they feel, which is very personal. It's very personal. So you can't have a discussion about something that does not feel like it has crossed a line with someone who all of their political arguments are like, but it's like violence when you say that. I feel unsafe when you say that we should restore the SALT deductions for blue states. How do you argue with that, right? And then when you get into some actually sensitive topics, it is bad news. It is bad news for sure. Very difficult to have a real conversation. And here's an example of this. This is a video that's starting to go viral. By the time you hear or see this, it might actually have gone fully viral. At a New York City Education Council meeting. Now, you got to remember, if you're involved in public education in New York City, the chances that you are a Bernie Sanders loving radical leftist who maybe thinks that like Stalin got a bad rap. He had some good ideas. The chances of that are pretty high. The chances that you're effectively a social justice commie are very high. Okay? So understand that this is not like a group of just random assortment from across America. This is the libs among the libs. Because public education in New York City is really the belly of the left-wing beast, so to speak. I mean, it is as in the center of the statist progressive wheelhouse as you could possibly find. And that's why this was so interesting. Now, the only part of the video that you can see is this woman's response. But I wanted to set this up before we play the audio. And hopefully producer Mark has like the full audio and not just a short version of it. But the audio is of this woman, Robin Broshi, who is criticizing a male colleague of hers because during a Zoom call where everyone's in their homes, during a Zoom call, a friend of his child, who is described in this audio as Brown, sat on his knee for a second. Which, how is that? Here you go. Here's the argument from this is lib on lib emotional violence is what this is. Play clip 11.
It hurts people when they see a white man bouncing a brown baby on their lap and they don't know the context. That is harmful. That makes people cry. It makes people log out of our meetings. They don't come here. They don't come to our meetings, and they give me a hard time because I'm not vocal enough. And I'm not trying to be a martyr. I'm trying to illustrate to you that you think you think I'm a social justice warrior, and you think I'm being patronizing, and I'm getting pressure for not being enough of an advocate. And I take that to heart, and that hurts me. And I have to learn to make how to be a better white person.
I would like to know
have people telling you that.
I would like to know before this meeting adjourns how having my friend's nephew on my lap was hurtful to people and was racist. Can you please explain?
Tom, I've explained it to you. You can Google, you can read a book. Read Ibram Kendi. Read White Fragility. Read How to Talk to White People. No, it's not my job to educate you. You're an educated white man.
You're right.
And you can read a book.
My friend is going to educate you.
Oh my gosh, get her a job on MSNBC. She needs it right away. Have her run for office. She could be the congresswoman from Brooklyn in a heartbeat, you know? Let her go. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. It was fantastic. This guy who I just from looking at him, I'm telling you, he watches Chris Hayes and Rachel Maddow too. Okay, this guy's a lib. He's on the New York City Council New York City Education Council. And notice how she went to Wellesley. I did a little due diligence. Went to Wellesley. I'm sure is like a feminist studies major or an education studies major, which people that major in education are also indoctrinated. It's like sociology. It's all just left-wing claptrap with a veneer of academia around it. But I just thought this was great. He's like, no, seriously, explain to me how it is hurtful to people watching a Zoom call that this guy's in his own home and his friend who has a minority nephew, you know, I didn't see the video of the child, so I don't know. I think he's described as brown. Friend who has a minority nephew sits on the guy's, knee for a second in the video. He's like, no, really, I want to know. She's like, read a book. Read White Fragility. And, the thing about this is that if I show this video to most of the libs that I know in New York City and Los Angeles and D.C. and said, well, you look at this one, they'd say, well, she has a point here. It really is, for some people, triggering to have and it's like, no, wait, why is it triggering? Just because she's upset by it? What is the rationale? It's not even possible to think of but all she saw was a white guy, brown child, and then it just gets jumbled up in her mind to be like, I'm not enough of an advocate. This is not okay. This is lunacy. Any person who has any understanding at all of race relations and just basic humanity would say, here's just a guy with a friend's child spending time together in an affable and friendly way. How could any normal person find that is a problem? Figure that that's some kind of an issue. You have to really do somersaults around logic and reason, but that is mainstream for Democrats now, especially if they went to Wellesley, let me tell you.
Well, I think right now we're where we were when New York City was having its peak epidemic. If you look back, when New York City peaked, we had about 34,000 cases a day. At the time, we were probably diagnosing 1 in 20 infections. So that meant we were having 700,000 new infections a day. Right now, we're going to have about 60,000 infections a day this week. Maybe we'll reach 75,000 or get close to it. We're probably diagnosing 1 in 12 infections. CDC said 1 in 10 a few weeks ago. It's probably 1 in 12 now because we're falling behind. That means we have about 700,000 infections a day nationally. So we're right back where we were at the peak of the epidemic during the New York outbreak. The difference now is that we really had one epicenter of spread when New York was going through its hardship. Now we really have 4 major epicenters of spread. Los Angeles, cities in Texas, cities in Florida, and Arizona. And Florida looks to be in the worst shape, and Georgia's heating up as well, and that's concerning.
Former FDA Commissioner Gottlieb here making the case quite clearly that we're worse off now with COVID-19 than we were at any other point. That's what we're being told. That this is the worst that this has been, or at least it goes back to the very beginning of this. My friends, this is insane. This is insane. I'm looking right now, as I talk to you, okay, at the coronavirus Centers for Disease Control and Prevention cases and deaths in the U.S. updated yesterday, July 5th, okay? Total new cases, 52,228, it says. This is compared to the data the day before. Total deaths, 271. Now, I understand that the way the reporting works, you're likely to see some displacement of deaths that occurred over the weekend into Monday reporting. I know that. I get that. But it's not going to be a displacement of 1,000 or 2,000 or no. What this is telling us is that the infection is spreading primarily to healthier, younger people who are able to handle and clear the virus, which then means that their immune systems will block the virus going forward. This then protects the overall community. It's not quite true herd immunity, but this is the only way this was ever going to go. You know, people just won't listen. They won't stand for reason on this one. Everyone just gives into panic and politics, and there is no other choice. Shutting down the country continuously till there's no COVID-19 out there is madness. We don't do this for seasonal flu. And when you look at the numbers now of what's happening now, not 3 months ago, now with this disease, you know, they're just beginning to tabulate how many people have died from the actual lockdown policy, from lack of treatment for various diseases, from lack of diagnoses for cancer, overdoses, diseases of despair. You know, we're always told mental health is health. What they have done to people's mental health, that's part of why you're seeing all these maniacs out in the streets, toppling statues and destroying everything. But no, we have to be told that it's just as bad as it was before. That is not true. It's also not true because we understand more about how to treat the disease. Now, we don't have a cure for it and we don't have a vaccine, but doctors and hospitals know more now about what to do at various stages of this. They have a better understanding of what the progression of the disease is, who is at particularly high risk. But total cases, 52,000 new cases as of yesterday from the day before, 271 new deaths. Shut down the country for 271 deaths. Now we really have to understand, why don't we shut down the country for 100 or 50 deaths a day, which during the height of flu season is not unusual at all. So we're just going to shut down the country because people get sick from diseases and people die? Is this going to be our answer all the time? Oh, they say, well, it's about managing the flow. Okay, if it's really about managing the flow, then tell us, why is it that there are some states where the numbers, I'm in one, New York, we're supposed to be in phase 3 today. There's some states where the numbers support even greater openness, but they won't do it. So they set a standard. We can't open until we hit X and Y numbers for COVID-19. And then some places like New York had to wait and wait and wait. And then we finally get there and they say, yeah, but other places are having a really rough time, so we're going to change the numbers. This is absurd. It's wrong. It's wrong. I would like to find a way for there to just be, look, I think we're at the point where there has to be real civil disobedience over this. I think there has to be non-compliance about this stupid and arbitrary rules. You know, I did see that, the New York Times had over the weekend, someone wrote a piece about how, here you go. New York Times. This was great. classic. Are protests dangerous? What experts say may depend on who's protesting what. Public health experts decry the anti-lockdown protests last spring as dangerous gatherings in a pandemic. Health experts seem less comfortable doing so now that marches are against racism. No crap. We all knew this. Some libs were pretending like this wasn't true, which was hilarious. Some in the media, too. Oh, no, they didn't say that. They were just saying they were people. Idiots. Idiots. And now you should not listen to these frauds. You should not listen to these frauds. If they really cared so much about keeping you safe, they wouldn't change their opinion because, yeah, people have to be in the streets yelling BLM, yeah. No, you can still die if you get coronavirus, even if you're yelling, tear down this statue or Black Lives Matter or whatever it is the protesters are yelling that day. What a stunning, but it's obvious too. You look, a lot of scientists, they go to the academy, spend a lot of years, in academic institutions. They deal with all this lib indoctrination stuff. Same thing there. Why would anyone think? We all know that college campuses are like little Marxist social justice factories. And everyone knows this. But we think that, but if you get a master's or a PhD or if you go to law school, it's different. They're not different. They're not. Ask anyone who's gone to law school in the last 10 years. There is no real difference. They have completely seized the academy. They have seized the places that confer credentials and the perception of intellectualism and intelligence on individuals throughout society. Right? That's the real power of these institutions. The reason the left wants control of Berkeley and Harvard and Yale is not because they want to make sure that the most elite classes of students go forward to be leaders in the future. That's all crap. They want, well, first and foremost, to have huge fat endowments and to overpay administrators and professors across the board. But they also want the ability to confer upon people the credential that will then be useful for the propagation of the ideology that institution has instilled in them in their 4 years. You go forward with a Yale or Harvard degree, no matter how stupid the crap you says is about defund police. Everyone goes, well, he or she went to Yale, so we must take them seriously on this. No, I disagree. It's not true. It's not real. That's not the way that we should view these things. And I'm just very agitated that we're having so many months of our lives taken away when you really look at what is happening in the country. We're dealing with this as best we can. There is no way to stop this virus, period, full stop. There's no way to stop it. It's just not going to happen. Didn't happen during the worst lockdown, the most extreme lockdown. If it was so easy, then places all across Europe, I mean, all these different countries that locked down, they should have been able to just stop the disease in its tracks. They weren't. One theory that needs a lot more, and I've read from epidemiologists who are willing to break the consensus, is that there's actually much more immunity out there in the population. We're told, there's no immunity. This is totally novel. Novel coronavirus, you hear. Well, no, there are other coronaviruses, and so the body's ability to fight against this virus may vary tremendously, individual to individual. Some people may be much more susceptible than others. We have done no real testing on this. We simply do not know. And our case fatality rate for it is lower than any European counterpart. We're basically tied with Germany, right there with Germany on this. All those other socialist healthcare systems like the UK, much worse. Much better to get COVID-19 in America than to get it overseas. Remember that when they're talking about how, we need a universal healthcare system. All this other stuff they say. It's just not the case that the media and the Democrat Party have a solution to this and that people just won't do what they're told. And this is what really continues to drive me nuts. It's not that there's a lack of a willingness to protect ourselves. It's that the advice, the mandates, forget about advice. Advice is fine. I'll take all the advice from medical doctors in the world. The mandates from government have been at odds with each other, have been counterproductive at times, have been politicized, and we're supposed to not notice this? We're supposed to, act like this is not the recent history that we've all gone through? You have the mayor of Miami, for example, play clip 8. Here's what he says.
There's no doubt that the fact that we opened, and the city of Miami was the last city in the entire state of Florida to open. I was criticized for waiting so long. But there's no doubt that the fact that when we reopened, people started socializing as if the virus didn't exist. And what we saw was before the stay-at-home order is we saw an increasing slope of 35 new cases per day. Right after we implemented the stay-at-home order, we started seeing that decline almost immediately. We got ahead of the curve, and we're seeing a declining slope of 14 cases a day. Just before this weekend, the incline slope was 91 new cases per day. So it's almost 3 times greater slope than it was prior to the stay-at-home order. So, it's extremely worrisome.
Cases do not tell you much. Cases from people who have minimal, mild symptoms. Okay, so what? And I always want to ask, I want to scream at these politicians. What is the answer then? We're going to lock down again for 6 weeks? Guess what? When the lockdown ends and people start living life again, there will be spread of this disease. So what are they even talking about? What is the point that they think they are making with all of this? It's about power. It's about control. And it's about trying to force feed measures and decisions to us that just don't make sense. They just don't make sense. Oh, this was one of my favorite tweets from over the weekend. From CNN, of course. A surprising new study found that the controversial anti-malarial drug hydroxychloroquine helped COVID-19 patients survive better in the hospital. Oh, my gosh. First of all, why is it surprising? Well, it's surprising because CNN, its anchors, its website, has been promoting that Trump was reckless to be hopeful for hydroxychloroquine's success. Never said it was definitely going to be helpful. Here's what we know. Rooting for this drug to work for the last 3 months or so, 4 months now, meant hoping for more human beings to beat this disease and go home to their families. Rooting against this drug and claiming it was unsafe, as CNN and others did, because they associated it with Trump, was reckless and stupid and cruel. But that's, once again, you want to understand the depths of Trump derangement syndrome? Even when it comes to a drug that would be useful in fighting against a pandemic that is killing a lot of people in America and around the world, liberals couldn't get past. Trump says this might work, so let's convince everybody it doesn't. They might have convinced doctors and some practitioners not to use a drug that would have saved lives. So when you want to talk about the recklessness of the media, the costs of it, let's remember that it's not just in rhetorical terms. There's a cost that is well beyond just the fights that we have on Twitter and in cable news. Decisions are made based upon this information, based upon the narratives that are formed, the positions that are taken. And those decisions can mean very damaging and even tragic things during a pandemic. And then we have the mask chorus. Oh my, here we go. We have, what is this, Governor Murphy? That the mask requirement is, here, play clip 9.
But do you think that there should be a national mask requirement?
I do, Andrea. It's become almost not even debatable. Certainly when you're going out and absolutely indoors. As I mentioned, this virus is a lot more lethal inside than outside. But if you're leaving your house, put on a mask. I think it ought to be a national requirement.
A national mask mandate. This is where Democrats are now. Do you know where the thorough and conclusive study about masks preventing the spread of this disease exists? If you do, please let me know, because as of now, it does not exist. I've talked to you about this. Mask wearing goes back about 120, 130 years as a medical practice, and it's always just been kind of like an accoutrement of medical professionals, stretching back to when, yeah, it makes sense. You don't want to be, if you're close to someone, you don't want to spit on them or have, but you're really close to somebody when that's the concern. I have people running around here that want masks to be worn when I walk past them in a, 1,500 square foot office lobby. Just walking past each other. Where's your mask? Why? It's just panic and superstition and control. Mandating mask wearing? If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. Mandating other people wear it in outside of healthcare providers or with high-risk individuals in an enclosed environment, the science just doesn't support it, folks. It doesn't exist. Show it to me if I'm missing it.